You are creating a true crime story about the Chicago Tylenol Murders, the unsolved 1982 poisoning case that killed 7 people and changed product safety forever. Character. This is an unsolved case with an unknown perpetrator. Use generic crime scene imagery, evidence photos, Tylenol bottles, cyanide capsules, location shots, Chicago suburbs, drugstores, homes, period-appropriate atmospheric visuals from 1982, task force operations, and victims' photographs where appropriate and respectful. Do not attempt to depict the unknown suspect. Visual. Documentary style following the terrifying week in September 1982, from quiet Chicago suburbs to a nationwide panic. Crime scenes across multiple locations, massive recall operations, and the task force investigation. Narration. Clear, journalistic but engaging. Conversational while maintaining credibility. Keep evergreen. This is a story about 7 innocent people who died taking pain medication and the killer who was never caught. September 29, 1982. A 12-year-old girl named Mary Kellerman woke up in her Elk Grove village home with a sore throat and runny nose. Her parents gave her 1 extra-strength Tylenol capsule. Within hours, Mary collapsed in the bathroom. By 7 in the morning, she was dead. Paramedics had no idea what killed her. That same day, 27-year-old postal worker Adam Janus came home from work to his Arlington Heights apartment complaining of chest pain. He took Tylenol from a bottle in his medicine cabinet. He collapsed on the floor and died shortly after. His family thought it was a massive heart attack. His brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa rushed to his home to comfort the grieving family. Devastated and stressed, they found the same Tylenol bottle Adam had used. Both took capsules. Within hours, Stanley and Teresa collapsed. Stanley died that day. Teresa was taken off life support the next day. 3 members of the same family, dead within 24 hours. But here's what nobody knew yet. These weren't isolated incidents. Mary Reiner, a 27-year-old new mother from Winfield, died the same day after taking Tylenol. Mary McFarland, a 31-year-old Lombard phone center employee, died on September 30th. Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant living in Chicago's Old Town neighborhood, was found dead in her apartment on October 1st. A receipt showed she'd purchased extra-strength Tylenol from a Walgreens on North Wells Street 3 days earlier. 1 capsule was missing from the bottle. 7 people, 4 days, all dead after taking the same medication. Arlington Heights village nurse Helen Jensen made the connection that changed everything. When she visited the Janus home, she noticed 6 capsules were missing from a single Tylenol bottle. She sent it for testing. The results were horrifying. Someone had carefully opened the capsules, replaced the acetaminophen powder with potassium cyanide, and resealed them. Each capsule contained enough poison to kill multiple people. The tampered bottles had been placed back on store shelves across the Chicago area. Jewel Foods locations in Arlington Heights and Elk Grove Village, an Osco Drug in Schaumburg, a Walgreens and Dominic's in Chicago, a Frank's Finer Foods in Winfield, 5 different stores. Someone had walked into these locations, taken bottles off the shelves, poisoned them, and returned them for unsuspecting customers to purchase. And it gets worse. Within 48 hours, Chicago Mayor Jane Byrne ordered all Tylenol products pulled from every store in the city. Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer, issued a nationwide recall. 31 million bottles with a retail value of over $100 million were pulled from circulation. It was the first mass recall in American history. Police cars drove through Chicago suburbs with loudspeakers blaring warnings. Do not take Tylenol until further notice. Parents threw away their medicine cabinets. Hospitals cleared their supplies. The panic spread beyond Chicago. Towns across America canceled Halloween trick-or-treating, terrified that candy could be poisoned the same way. The entire nation was paralyzed by fear. Illinois Attorney General Ty Fonner was at a fundraising event when an aide pulled him aside. "You have to take this call now." Fonner assembled what would become the Tylenol Murders Task Force. Local police, state investigators, FBI agents. Hundreds of law enforcement personnel working around the clock. They faced an impossible task. The killer could be anyone. Someone who walked into a drugstore, looked like every other customer, and committed mass murder without leaving a trace. The investigation generated over 100,000 tips. Every lead went nowhere. Then, on October 8th, a letter arrived at Johnson & Johnson's Pennsylvania office. The writer claimed to be the killer. If the company wanted to stop the killing, it would cost $1 million. The letter was signed with details only the perpetrator would know. Or would they? Investigators traced the letter to James William Lewis, a Missouri native living in Chicago under the assumed name Robert Richardson. Lewis had a disturbing past and a documented interest in poisons. A confidential law enforcement document later revealed his fingerprints were found on pages about cyanide in a poisoning reference book. But there was a problem. When the murders occurred, Lewis and his wife had already left Chicago, paying cash for train tickets to New York under fake names. They had no demonstrable connection to the Chicago area drugstores. Here's what nobody's talking about. Lewis was never charged with the murders, only with extortion. At trial, his lawyers claimed he wrote the letter to frame his wife's former employer. In October 1983, he was convicted of attempted extortion and sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He served 13 years total. During a prison interview, Lewis insisted he did not commit the murders. He's maintained that position for over 40 years. The task force investigated other suspects. Roger Arnold, a dockhand at a jewel warehouse, was questioned extensively. He became so enraged at being publicly identified as a suspect that he later shot an innocent man he mistook for the bartender who gave his name to police. The victim, John Stanisha, a computer programmer and father of 3, became the 8th casualty connected to this case. Arnold was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years, but he was ruled out as the Tylenol killer. Kevin Masterson of Lombard, who allegedly held a grudge against Jewel grocery stores, was investigated and also ruled out. The FBI even requested DNA samples from Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, because his first crimes occurred in Chicago, and his parents lived in suburban Lombard in 1982. Kaczynski denied ever possessing potassium cyanide. No suspect could be definitively linked to the poisonings. But then something changed. The case forced a revolution in consumer safety. Johnson & Johnson developed tamper-resistant packaging, foil seals, plastic strips, cotton wadding, features that made it obvious if a product had been opened. Other companies followed. Congress passed federal anti-tampering laws making product tampering a federal crime with a maximum sentence of life in prison. The legislation became known as the Tylenol Bill. The case that couldn't be solved created protections that have saved countless lives. Lewis remained the primary suspect until his death in July 2023. He was never charged. The murders remain unsolved. Investigators continue working the case, hoping new DNA technology might finally identify the killer. But more than 4 decades later, the Tylenol murders remain one of America's most haunting mysteries. 7 people died doing something we all do without thinking, taking a pain reliever for a headache or sore throat. Mary Kellerman never made it to school that day. The Janus family was destroyed in a single afternoon. Mary Reiner left behind a newborn baby. Paula Prince was found alone in her apartment. Their killer walked free. Hundreds of copycat crimes followed in the years after. 3 more deaths from tampered capsules in 1986. The psychological impact rippled through generations. John Stanisha's youngest daughter said taking Tylenol felt like swallowing sadness and grief. The case exposed how vulnerable we all are. Someone with knowledge, patience, and malicious intent can kill strangers without ever being identified. The Tylenol murders weren't crimes of passion or profit. They were random, indiscriminate, calculated. The killer chose victims they would never meet, in locations they might never visit again, and vanished without leaving forensic evidence that could be traced. What does this say about the systems designed to protect us? The FDA had no tamper-resistant requirements before 1982. Store security was minimal. Anyone could pick up a product, walk to a quiet aisle, and tamper with it undetected. The investigation involved over 100 officers, thousands of interviews, and millions of dollars in resources. And still, nothing. The killer outsmarted one of the largest task forces ever assembled. Some investigators believe the perpetrator is dead. Others think they're still alive, watching the case remain unsolved year after year. James Lewis always claimed innocence, but investigators never stopped suspecting him. Meetings between prosecutors and investigators continued into 2022, 40 years after the murders, exploring whether Lewis could finally be charged. Then he died, making it unlikely anyone will ever face justice for these crimes. 7 families never got answers. 7 graves with questions that will never be resolved. And somewhere, maybe the person who committed these murders knows they got away with it.